The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast of our virtual meeting of the June 9th, 2020 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Madeline Sundberg, and I serve as chair of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Bjornberg.
Present.
Fritz. Howard.
Present.
Kling.
Present.
Johnson.
Present.
Mack.
Present.
Sandbolt.
Present.
Stady.
Here.
Sundberg.
Present.
Vandereyck.
Here.
That's 9 members. Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we do have quorum. With that, we will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. So our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for the meeting, and we'll be working from the agenda that was available online. I will go through the agenda and sort out which items will be continued to a future meeting, what items will be discussed, and what items will be put on the consent agenda to be approved as recommended by staff without further discussion. So item number 4 is the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District. That item will be discussed. And item number 5 is 4800 Irving Avenue South, Ward 13, which is the demolition of historic resource, and that item will be discussed. It looks like staff member Andrea Burke would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is not the correct agenda. The correct agenda is item number 4 to be 4800 Irving Avenue South, and item number 5 to be the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District.
They switched. Okay, thank you for letting me know.
I think it is correct online. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the proposed agenda is item number 4, 4800 Irving Avenue South, Ward 13. Item number 5, Lyndhurst Residential Historic District. Both items will have a staff presentation, public comment, and commission discussion and action. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
So move, Commissioner Mack.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz. Oh, we established she's not here. Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Stady.
Aye.
Vandereyck.
Aye. Sorry.
Sundberg.
Aye.
Thank you. That's 9. 9
Okay.
members.
The
Yay.
agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our May 19th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Stady so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Stady. Is there a second?
Johnson.
Sandbolt, second.
Oh, I'm going to give that to Commissioner Johnson. Thank you. Any discussion? With that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Bjornberg,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kling,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Sandbolt,
Aye.
Stady,
Aye.
Vanderenk,
I abstain.
Sundberg.
Aye.
So that's 8 yay. Thank you.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Before I open the public hearing, let me summarize the process for conducting the public hearing in this virtual format. The process is as follows. Well, all items will be discussed, so we'll be moving straight to those items. We will hear a presentation from the staff. The commissioners may ask questions of the staff. Then we will hear from the applicant, and the commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. After that, I will open the public hearing and we will invite public comment. At that time, we'll be taking speakers in the order that they pre-registered, if there are any. I believe there are for both items. Speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. We ask that after your name is called, you state your name and address for the record and then proceed with your comments. After we've completed the list of any pre-registered speakers, we'll move on to anyone else who's in the queue who may have called in. In order to activate your microphones at that time, you'll need to press *6 on your phone. So again, we'll take the list of pre-registered speakers and then open the floor to anyone else who is in the queue. We'll just ask that everybody stays on topic and discusses the items that are before us today. After the public comments are complete, I'll close the hearing. Commissioners will deliberate and act on the applications before us. So our first item is going to be item number 4, 4800 Irving Avenue South, Ward 13. And I believe this presentation is by Rob Sklecki.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Rob Sklecki. I'm a city planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED. Today I'm presenting a demolition of historic resource application for 4800 Irving Avenue South, which is located in the potential Minnehaha Parkway Historic District. Next slide, please. The property contains a one-story ranch home that was constructed in 1951 and lies within the boundaries of the potential Minnehaha Parkway Historic District. The dwelling was constructed by Curtis Kingbay, who was a prominent Minneapolis builder, and it was his family's residence that was designed by local architects Armstrong and Schlichting. The building is characterized by a low-pitched hip roof and portions of wide eaves in an abnormal shape of massing. Like many contemporary style buildings of the era, the dwelling shows a clear connection to its form integration into the landscape, which is shown through earthly materials, use of color and asymmetrical sprawling appearance and massing, fenestration, and detail. The city of Minneapolis may consider Curtis Kingbay to be a master builder, as CPED has identified multiple extant modern buildings that were constructed under the Kingbay name throughout the 20th century. However, multifamily residential buildings are much more characteristic of Kingbay built dwellings. Architects Armstrong and Schlichting were important area architects that designed various schools, churches, hospitals, public buildings, and others in the Twin Cities. 4800 Irving Avenue South is somewhat unusual for the firm, as they weren't really known for designing single-family dwellings. Next slide, please. The property was included in the 1999 Minnehaha Parkway, an assessment of significance as being part of the potential Minnehaha Parkway Historic District. The property is within the period of significance that was outlined through that study, which is between 1889 and 1951. In the 2005 Southwest Minneapolis Historic Resources Inventory, the consultants noted that Minnehaha Parkway appeared to be a good candidate for local designation based on criteria 5 as a significant landscape design and or pattern of development. However, the subject property was not surveyed individually at that time. Regarding the potential historic district, the 2005 study concluded that further research may be needed to identify if there are individual properties within the potential historic district that would qualify for local or national register designation. The city of Minneapolis considers the current boundaries of the potential Minnehaha Parkway Historic District to extend both north and south sides of the public parkway from Lake Harriet to the west to Minnehaha Park to the east, and generally include directly adjacent private parcels on either side that border the parkway. In November 2019, CPED wrote a historic review letter and determined that the property may be eligible for local designation based on this background and understanding. In the applicant's report, it suggested that the boundaries of the period of the boundaries and the period of significance of the property as currently established may be subject to reevaluation. The applicant details that the boundaries of the period and the period of significance for the district, the potential district, should be viewed as the Minnehaha Parkway segment of the Grand Rounds potential historic district, as known to be nationally register eligible. The applicant states that the residential areas of the potential district should not be the main focus of the district's significance, and that the potential Minnehaha Historic District should be evaluated as the Minnehaha segment of the greater context of the National Register eligible Grand Rounds District. Residential areas, to clarify, are not considered part of the NRHP eligible district. However, for the purposes of local landmark eligibility, CPED still considers the residences to be potentially eligible, and we review these on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing building and has noted interest in constructing a single-family dwelling on the parcel. The subject property retains the integrity required to be a contributing resource. Very little evidence of exterior alterations are evident, but the interior has seen some changes over time. However, in CPED's review, the subject property does not appear to be individually eligible for local designation. Staff finds that the property does not have enough significance under criteria 1, 2, or 3 to merit potential local designation, respectively, for association to significant events or periods, significant persons, distinctive elements of neighborhood identity, and the property is not likely to be archaeologically significant under criteria 7 either. The property displays a more classic sprawling post-war ranch design in comparison to other designated properties in the city, and there are many ranches in the city that are of similar contemporary style to the King Bay residence. There would likely be better candidates for local designation as exceptional examples of a ranch. Thus, the property doesn't appear to be significant under criterion 4 for a property that embodies distinctive characteristics of a ranch built in this style. The parcel, though on an unusually shaped lot, and has somewhat unique massing to fit the parcel, there's not enough evidence to suggest that the landscape design or development pattern is worthy of designation either, and the property therefore doesn't appear to be significant under criterion 5. The subject property was home to Curtis King Bay, who is a significant Twin Cities builder. He may be considered a master architect due to his prolific career building apartment buildings throughout the city, but as mentioned before, he was more well known for building multiple family dwellings, and the subject property is not the best example of a King Bay designed dwelling, therefore. The applicant also highlights 2110 Park Avenue as an apartment building that is or was built and owned by Curtis King Bay and is more representative of the broader work of the builder throughout Minneapolis, and staff agrees that examples such as 2110 Park Avenue would be better candidates for local designation to highlight the career of Curtis King Bay and further his company's possible status as master builders. The property retains some architectural features it seems representative of Armstrong and Schlichting's design, but the firm was also better known for designing and constructing larger scale public buildings at the time, which include many churches throughout the Twin Cities. So the subject property isn't the best example of their work either. Staff does not find that the property is significant under criteria 6 for the work of a master architect or builder in this situation. In CFA's review, the property does not appear eligible for local designation. The applicant claims that there are no reasonable alternatives to the destruction of the building, citing that this is the case both due to the significance of the property in connection to the potential Minnehaha Parkway Historic District and understanding the economic value of the house given costs of renovation. The applicant states that the property is not individually significant based in design for a dwelling designed by either Armstrong or Schlichting or built by Curtis Kingby, as they're better examples of both the architect and builder's work elsewhere. The applicant also believes that the cost to perform the needed renovation work exceed the economic value of the property. The applicant has submitted evidence that details the condition of the home would require significant attention to correct the property because it was built on unstable soil in a floodplain. And they included a recent structural engineer assessment by Meyer Borgman Johnson, which detailed the effect of the poor soil in this area on the home. Although it would be possible to address the dwelling structural issues, the applicant explains that it would not be economically feasible given the value of the existing structure as a property on the market and its no need for structural rehabilitation. So in CFA's review, the property at 4800 Irving Avenue South is not listed or eligible for listing in the National Register. The property does not appear to be eligible for local designation. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the applicant, for the application by Charlene Royce of Hess Royce and Company for the property located at 4800 Irving Avenue South and recommend to approve the demolition of historic resource application. And with that, I am available for questions. I realized that there was one more slide, so if you want to switch over to that for the last, thank you. But I'm available for questions as staff, but I understand that the applicant is here as well and would be able to take questions further. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions for staff? I don't see any at this time, so I think if the applicant would like to speak, I'll open the public hearing, and Charlene, if you could press *6.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for, oh, hold on. Okay, is that better? Okay, I'm going to try to do it this way. Are we still getting feedback?
You know, make sure you turn down the whatever you're listening to in the background.
Yeah, we've muted everything we can possibly mute. I think we finally got it. Okay. Okay, well, thank you, commissioners and staff, for allowing us to speak. I'm Charlene Royce with Hess Royce and Company at 100 North 1st Street in Minneapolis. I'm an architectural historian and a historian, and with me, socially distanced, is Corey Kingbay, who is the grandson of the owner and who is also the marketing agent for the property. He's a real estate agent. Because of the difficulties of doing presentations under these circumstances, I will be brief, but I did want to just run through a few things. I've had the good fortune to have a lot of opportunities to have studied the Grand Rounds over the years, and so I'm very familiar with it and with some of the challenges. When I first looked at it for the National Register, I think it was back in the 90s, I really thought that we should include a frame of houses along the edge of the Minnehaha Parkway and other parts.
Charlene, I believe you've cut out. Can you try *6 again? Did her phone call drop?
We are looking into it on the back end. Hang on one moment.
Okay, I think I'm back on another phone, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about this. Okay. Anyway, I've been able to work for several decades on the Grand Rounds and have my thoughts have kind of evolved in it. Also, I am an enthusiastic advocate for preserving post-World War II resources. Our office did the National Register nomination for Cedar Square West, which opened in 1973, and also for PV Plaza, which opened in 1975. And then I was involved with a successful 10-year struggle to save it, along with many people on this call. And so I was hesitant to get involved with 4800 Irving. But as I learned more about the property and I reflected more on the significance of Minnehaha Parkway and the Grand Rounds, I came to the sad but realistic conclusion that there was actually a good case for demolition for this particular property. Having said that, Corey and I are available for questions. I think that that's probably the easiest way to go, given the other challenges we face with the technology. We've made the case in the application, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant?
Welcome to the audio conference.
I don't see any questions at this time. Did Corey Kingbay want to make any sort of statement?
Okay. Sorry, we're doing it again. No, although he's available to answer questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Charlene or Corey? I don't see any at this time. I will then open the public hearing to the public. I believe we have one more caller on the line. Is that correct?
I believe we have two at this point. Thanks.
Two at this point? Okay, I think the first one to speak is, I'm going to slaughter the name probably, Van Durer.
This is Kathy Hendrickson.
I really thought that we should include.
Hi, Kathy. Are you here to speak on 4800 Irving? I guess I'd ask the other applicant or the other resident who wanted to speak. Looks like a Claudia. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on 4800 Irving on the line? Press *6.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you. Okay, this is Rachel Vogel. I'm at 4821 East Lake Harriet Boulevard. I signed up to just ask some questions and comments concerning the demolition of 4800 Irving. As a 14-year resident of the Lake Harriet Minnehaha Parkway area, I have concerns about the demolition of a house with no plans necessarily for the owners that are going to be moving into the house. Essentially, the house being built on speculation of a homeowner to buy, especially a historical property. Let's just say that what if the people that buy the home would be interested in keeping some original doors or things of that nature that would preserve the Kingbay architect heritage. I just think if this is a significant house, although it may be good to tear it down because of cost, and other issues, that doesn't mean that there's aspects of the home that wouldn't want to be integrated into the design of the home and honor that architectural legacy. So those are my concerns. I'm also concerned about demolishing a home with, I don't want the land to sit vacant without, for a long period of time. So those are my comments. Can Corey or the historical preservation respond to any of those?
Thank you for your comments. We don't allow a dialogue between commenters, but thank you. Your comments have been noted.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, we don't respond to that?
Is there another resident from nearby that wanted to speak? Do we have another caller on the line?
Well, we can't respond to that doesn't make sense.
Hello, my name's Sally Gillette.
Hi, Sally.
Hi.
Could you give your address for the record and then tell us your comments?
Yes, I'm here.
We have two at this point. At this point? Okay.
Am I unmuted now? Hello?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay. Did you get my address?
No, I did not.
Okay, it's 4823 East Lake Harriet Parkway. And I've lived in this neighborhood for many years, probably 35, I'm guessing. And one of the concerns I have is that the King Bay house, as it is now on 4800 Irving, sits perfectly on that lot. It was well designed when it was designed and has some, I think, distinct historical post-war architecture. Although I'm not an expert on this, I just know what is aesthetically makes it comfortable to live in this neighborhood. What I do know is not going to be comfortable in this neighborhood is what might replace that home. Do we have plans, or is that outside of the scope of this meeting? Hello?
We do not have documents of what would be in place at 4800 Irving, because this is just a demolition and it's determining if it's historic or not. If we decide it's not historic, they don't need to provide plans to us of what would be there instead.
Okay, well, I think it's historic and I would like to see it not be demolished.
Thank you for your comments. I think you brought up some valid points.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you'd like to have on the record?
Not for me, except I know that Kathy Hendrickson was trying to call in. She's a neighbor across the street. If we could give her an opportunity to speak.
I will check to see if she is here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Is Kathy here or anybody else who wished to speak to this item?
I am here.
You are there. Hi, Kathy. Oh, I heard you, but now I don't hear you. Are you still there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, this is Kathy Hendrickson. I live on the adjacent property to the west to 48 Irving Avenue. And I respectfully, can you hear me still?
Yes.
Yes.
Our family, we respectfully ask that the Heritage Preservation Committee deny demolition. I am also a real estate agent. Throughout this meeting, the applicant has been referred to as the applicant, who is a real estate agent. They have no vested interest in demolishing this home. The home is not of threat structurally. We had a similar
situation when we moved into our home in the adjacent lot. Yes, there were some issues in the lower level, but we lived in our home for 4 years before we remodeled it. And there is no reason for this home to be demolished at this time. It's been on the market for 255 days, and we do not want to see it sit empty until somebody with vested interest who is going to spend time with an architect to design a new home or to remedy the issues that the existing home has is involved. I do not feel, again, I am a real estate agent. I do not feel a real estate agent should be able to make the decision or apply for demolition of a home. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to check with staff. Is there anybody else on the line?
Be comfortable in this neighborhood is what might replace that home. Do we have
Staff, is there anybody else who wished to speak to 4800 Irving?
No one, Chair Sundberg, no one else has signed up to speak to this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Since we have everybody's comments, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item, and commissioners, let's discuss. Who would like to speak?
This is Commissioner Stady.
Hi, Commissioner Stady.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the demolition of the historic resource application for 4800 Irving Avenue South.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would second that, Mac.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Discussion on the motion. Anybody wishing to speak?
I guess I would just address some of the issues.
Can you turn your camera on, Commissioner Mack?
I think it's on.
Oh, there you are.
So really our task is to look at the distinctiveness of this structure. And, you know, I live on a block where houses have been torn down, and it is never very comfortable, even if they aren't really wonderful houses. But it's just our task to determine whether this is a historic resource. And I guess looking at it, it would seem that if it is, then we have about you know, hundreds of thousands or more in the Twin Cities area. It's just not a distinctive house, and I think the staff did a good job of parsing that all out. So I understand the concerns, and just have to do what we have to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this item? Commissioner Howard.
Hi, hope you can hear me. I just wanted to follow up on what Commissioner Mack said and what Charlene Royce presented. A house like this would make more sense if it was part of a concerted development effort of the same era. Although it's on the parkway, that parkway really is part of the Grand Rounds, and as I've come to know the Grand Rounds over the years, I tend to agree with Charlene Royce that the critical part of that is the actual parkway, the park land, and that landscape design. I'm not seeing in this neighborhood a concerted effort of similar architectural design. So I would be looking for like a residential district that would be associated with this, and I'm not seeing that. And so I tend to agree with Charlene Royce's evaluation.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? I don't see anybody else. I appreciate the members of the public who came to speak on this item. I understand concerns about what is going to be in in the place, I encourage you to work with the applicant, talk to your neighbor, try to find out, but it's sort of out of our scope at this point. I agree that looking through, I think staff did a good job of analyzing the potential of this property, and that at this time, I agree that the historic nature isn't really standing out to me. So I'll do a last call for comments from commissioners. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak on this item? I don't see any. So would the clerk please call a roll on the motion?
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Stady.
Aye.
Van Dyke.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
That's 9 yeas.
Thank you. That motion passes. The applicant may talk to staff about next steps tomorrow. With that, we will move on to our second discussion item. This is the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District, Ward 13, and the staff report will be presented by Andrea Burke.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Good evening. My name is Andrea Burke, and I am the supervisor for the Historic Preservation team in CPED. I am presenting tonight on the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District Designation Study. Next slide, please. On July 30th, 2019, the Heritage Preservation Commission placed a portion of the East Harriet and Lyndhurst neighborhoods under interim protection as a potential historic district after denying the demolition of a property at 4632 Emerson Avenue South. After conducting a reconnaissance survey of the study area, a local preservation consultant, New History, prepared a designation study that was completed in February of 2020. First identified in 2005, the study area surveyed by the consultant was bounded by 42nd Street West on the north, 48th Street West on the south, DuPont Avenue South on the east, and East Lake Harriet Parkway on the west. The designation study, however, recommends a smaller historic district boundary of 46th Street West on the north, DuPont Avenue South on the east, 48th Street West on the south, and both sides of Fremont Avenue South on the west in the Lyndhurst neighborhood only. During the study, it was discovered that the properties north of 46th Street West and west of Fremont Avenue South were larger in size and scale, had more infill construction, and substantial alterations. Next slide, please. The Lyndhurst Residential Historic District consists of 66 homes built between 1893 and 1937, with one home constructed in 1984. The area encompasses the homes that initially made up the colony, the 9 families who settled on land sold by Charles Loring beginning in 1893. The colony remained relatively isolated until after 1905, when additional development was spurred by the arrival of the automobile. The city's emerging upper middle class chose popular architects at the time to design their homes in various period revival styles, while skilled laborers utilized expert craftsmanship to build each home. Next slide, please. Linden trees covered the area, and lots were large enough to fit a large home and a separate garage. The historic district has excellent integrity. Only one house is recommended as non-contributing following comments from the State Historic Preservation Office. Next slide, please. The historic district has significance under 3 local criteria. Criterion 3 for its large lots, mix of architectural styles prevalent with the middle class in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as well as similarities in setback, scale, and massing. The district features the key character defining elements of the Lyndhurst neighborhood. Under criterion 4, for its variety of period revival architectural styles that were prevalent with the emerging middle class in the late 19th and early 20th century. Next slide, please. And criterion 5, for its development pattern as an early automobile suburb with large lots lined with linden trees, with houses sharing similar size, scale, architectural language, massing, and setbacks. The Lyndhurst Residential Historic District, as I mentioned, has excellent integrity. While many of the homes have been altered to accommodate updated living standards, the alterations have been compatible with the size, massing, and character with both the individual properties as well as the surrounding homes within the proposed boundaries. Following the State Historic Preservation Office's comments, only one property is recommended as non-contributing, which represents the highest ratio of contributing to non-contributing resources for a local historic district in Minneapolis to date. Next slide, please. Under Minneapolis 2040, the comprehensive plan, the district is identified as urban neighborhood for future land use and is interior 1 in the build form overlay. The designation of Lyndhurst would have no impact on the use of the properties and would have minimal impact on the built form of the properties. Interior 1 is guiding building heights between 1 and 2.5 stories. 3 policies of Minneapolis 2040 would apply directly to the designation of the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District. Policy 60, intrinsic value of properties. The Lyndhurst district represents one of the highest concentration of homes which retain historic integrity in the body of the city of Minneapolis's designated properties, demonstrating the value of intact historic neighborhoods. Policy 92, identify and evaluate historic resources. Next slide, please. Minneapolis doesn't have a historic district quite like Lyndhurst among its 18 currently designated districts. It's distinct because it represents a concentration of middle-class homes in period revival styles. The development of the district was dependent on the increased accessibility of the automobile to middle-class buyers, as the development was not located near streetcar lines. And Policy 93, stewarding historic properties. Given the high degree of historic integrity in Lyndhurst, designation will encourage the maintenance and preservation of the homes within its boundaries. Next slide, please. The designation will preserve the unique architectural styles, large lots and setbacks, and character of the historic district and will encourage the retention of houses of the same vintage in the surrounding neighborhood. Next slide, please. On April 17th, 2020, the State Historic Preservation Office concurred with staff recommendation and supported local designation of the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District, noting the district's significance as a distinct neighborhood in Minneapolis with architectural significance for the well-conserved houses illustrating a range of styles in the early 20th century. And on April 27th, the City Planning Commission voted to support local designation of the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District. Next slide, please. As such, the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission and City Council adopt staff findings for the local designation of the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District and recommend to approve local designation. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff?
Yes, I'd like to hear a bit about the community meetings that were held and what kind of reaction we've had from the property owners.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. I'd be happy to talk about it. On October 1st and October 23rd, we held 2 initial community meetings with residents of the East Harriet neighborhood and the Lyndhurst neighborhood over at the Lyndhurst Community Center. And reactions were mixed. I think there was a lot of questions about what historic designation meant, what this would mean for proposed changes to their properties. Some residents expressed support for the designation. A lot of residents also expressed their opposition to it at those initial meetings. At that point, we had a much larger study area of 216 properties. This was before the consultant had gone out to study the area, and it was largely a Q&A at that time with the council member of Ward 13 to address the neighborhood's questions. The last community meeting was held last Tuesday on June 2nd. It was a virtual format, and the majority of comments at that time were in opposition to historic designation. There was a lot of concern about not wanting to be told what to do with their properties, as well as the general sentiment that they were already taking great care of their properties and did not request further government oversight. There was also a lot of Q&A and information provided as to what it means to be a designated district, as well as what some of the applications involved, as well as what examples of design guidelines would be. I understand that there are a lot of the residents here tonight to provide public verbal testimony, and then you have also received in your packets and additional comments today received from residents who have expressed their opposition, with also other residents who have expressed their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. It looks like Commissioner Howard would like to speak.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions, and one follows up on Commissioner Mack's, and that is, what will the process be for developing design guidelines going forward if we were to designate this district? And the second one is based on a lot of the comments that we received, and we've received a lot of comments that have asked for a delay or a dismissal of this designation, especially in light of George Floyd's murder and the ensuing protests and the vandalism. And I appreciate and I echo their concerns about what the city's priorities should be at this time. But I'm wondering what the ramifications would be if we were to delay a vote, if we were to table this vote, or if we were to dismiss it entirely.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. To address your first question about design guidelines, what would happen should you so choose to designate this district, and should the City Council also choose to designate this district, as it is their final decision on whether the properties become designated as a historic district. We would continue to hold community meetings and work with the residents as well as the neighborhood organization to work on design guidelines that the residents feel comfortable with, but that also meet the standards, identifying features that they feel are important and defining to their area. There are certain, as I've explained, there are certain, we have to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards with the design guidelines, but also in working with the owners on items that, as I heard in large protests largely, is that they spend an enormous amount of time taking care of their properties and are very proud of them. And to ensure that the upkeep is still in line with all of the hard work that they are already doing, but that the, I guess you could say, restrictions so much and so forth are already continuing what's happening there, as well as finding a good balance with what also meets the standards in terms of upkeeping their homes and continuing to be able to upgrade their properties. I think there are a lot of perhaps misunderstandings or misconceptions that historic designation means that we won't allow them to upgrade their homes. Adding insulation is still allowed, adding air conditioning is still allowed, changing out windows is still allowed, upgrading your siding is still allowed. It's, you know, preservation is guided change. And I think we would try to, I would work with all of the residents to ensure that they are comfortable with what gets put forth in as design guidelines. In terms of your second question about what a lot of comments have been to table either indefinitely or for a period of time this designation, the powers given to the Heritage Preservation Commission are that they can extend interim protection should they choose to not decide on this item tonight for a period of up to 6 months. Options for that are also, I wouldn't say the possibilities are endless, but an option is to not extend interim protection for all 216 properties that were put under interim protection. It is possible to extend it for just the proposed boundaries should the HPC agree with those boundaries. But the other option is to decide not in favor of designation tonight, and that decision would be final, and that recommendation would then be put forth to the City Council, and they would then either vote to support that recommendation of, for example, not designating, or vote to overturn that recommendation and vote to designate. They have that power. I'm not 100% sure. I would have to check with our council, but I do believe the City Council is the only one that has the powers to table relatively indefinitely. I know that has happened with one other district, but one thing to note, as put forth and as decided by our current council, once a decision is made final by the City Council on a historic district, that is final, that is it. This district cannot come back to life. It cannot be revived. All the other properties that are under interim protection would be taken off. And should this district not go through, there would at this point not be another chance to bring this on the docket again. If I am interpreting that as currently. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Howard?
It does. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any other questions for staff? I don't see any at this time, so I will open the public hearing for this item. It sounds like the applicant is here. I believe that's Tamara Lett. Would you like to press *6 on your phone to activate your microphone?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Tamara Lute. I am a historian with New History. Given the nature of the online forum, I am speaking at the time of the applicant, but I'm clearly not the applicant for a historic district. I am here to speak on behalf of the New History team that prepared the designation study and conducted the historic resource survey, in part because the originally proposed survey boundaries in the request for proposals that city staff issued in October of 2019 did include 200 plus properties, and research and reconnaissance surveys and got us down to a recommendation of a district with 66 properties. And so I wanted to speak a bit about the methodology and how we got there. Andrea noted that the designation study is in response to a demolition of a potential historic resource permit, and the city issued a request for proposals for the study and survey in October. And New History, the firm where I am employed, submitted a proposal, and we were awarded the project. And one of the requirements that we had to meet as part of the RFP was to be someone who meets the Secretary of the Interior's professional qualification standards, and that's defined by the Secretary of the Interior. And the New History team that completed the designation study and survey meets the qualification standards in history, architectural history, and historic architecture. So brought a lot of training to bear on our survey work and our archival research. The goal of a survey and a designation study is to determine whether or not properties identified as potential historic resources meet the requirements for local designation outlined in the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. And so as the New History team began to walk the boundaries that were originally proposed in a 2005 survey prepared by Mead and Hunt, what we began to notice was that there were different, what I'll call character areas within the originally proposed district boundaries. We saw an area of highly concentrated, highly intact buildings that shared some architectural language, some site organization, large setbacks, other large houses. When they had garages, they were at the rear of the property, and research would tell us those garages all really began to be constructed on the sites around the same time. We looked at a lot of plat maps, and we were able from maps to see how the neighborhood began to develop and from where it began to develop. And as we walked the neighborhood, the other thing that we really began to notice is that the blocks to the north, south, and west of the proposed district had just experienced considerably more infill construction. So either properties were removed and new houses were constructed, or there had been open parcels and larger houses, new houses had been built in that place. And then similarly, a number of the houses had undergone some pretty extensive renovations that changed the architectural style and language of the house from its early 20th century to appearance as something more contemporary to the time of the renovation. And so what we noticed was that those blocks just did not have the same high degree of historic integrity and same concentration of historic integrity that we found in the proposed district boundaries. And as Andrea noted, with only one of 66 houses recommended as non-contributing because it was constructed in the 1980s, this is just an incredible concentration of houses with historic integrity as a historic district. The other thing that we noticed, and what consultants like those of a new history who are studying historic districts have to consider is where large geographic and physical dividers are located within a district. And in the instance of the originally proposed boundaries, 46th and DuPont, they form a large parkway, and it's called Kings Highway, and it really does create a robust separation and like visible barrier. So that's something that we have to consider. And as we were considering that, we noticed that the houses to the east of the proposed district across DuPont Avenue, they just have a very different character. They're a little more modest in scale than the houses that we were studying on the other side of DuPont. They were set on smaller lots. They were built considerably closer to the street with much smaller setbacks. And so we believe that they represent just a different development pattern. When you look at parcel maps, you can see that something different is happening over there. And so combined with archival research, we recommended the boundaries that are bound by 46th Street west on the north, DuPont Avenue south on the east, 48th Street west on the south, and Fremont Avenue south on the west, just because the integrity and the concentration of properties was so great, and they shared very many common characteristics, and they most importantly met local designation criteria. And as Andrea noted, that was criterion 3, 4, and 5. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamara. Are there any questions for the applicant, commissioners? I don't see any questions at this time, so I will open the hearing to the public. I'm going to be taking people in the order of this list. It looks like Commissioner Stady, you have a question for the applicant?
Yes, just a quick one. I do understand. I really am impressed with the compact dimensions of this district, but I think the address, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's 4721 Girard. I was wondering if you did any particular research on that house. It was also Gracia Countryman and Mary Todd's house, but Gracia actually helped design it, and that's where her son lived with them, and the two of them raised her son.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me, Commissioner Stady?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because the there is also a Countryman Todd house within the boundaries of the proposed Lyndhurst Residential Historic District. And in reading Gracia Countryman's writings, and this is a little bit on the scope of what we're talking about here, but you raised the question. She talks about how they built this first house that was in the boundaries that we're looking at here, and then the three of them outgrew it, and they built the larger house at 4721 Girard. We did do kind of we did a reconnaissance level survey, and that's also included with the designation study of some other properties, and did look at some properties that we saw as potentially architecturally significant. I did not enter into an exploration of Rachel Countryman and Marie Todd's family life and raising their son in this house, because at the reconnaissance level, that's a bit beyond the scope of what we're able to address. But they were interesting because they were one of the families that I found that lived both within the boundaries and outside of the boundaries of what we're proposing. So did that answer your question?
Well, I'm sorry I don't have this in front of you. I did a little research, and I don't know if they actually were a family unit until they were in the Girard building. I bring this up as possible LGBTQIA history involved with this potential district. So that's my 2 cents on that. But I'm happy to see one of the houses is getting designated. But I think more, as far as her life went, I think the Girard house is more important for her biography than the Fremont house.
From an individual perspective, I can imagine that there would be an opportunity to do an intensive level study of that property and learn more. Marie Todd was listed as a resident in city directories in the Fremont house, and that's what I'm able to see too here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stady. Are there any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any. So to revisit the protocol, I'll be taking the list of speakers, starting with the pre-registered speakers, and then I'll open the floor to anyone else who's in the queue. We'll ask speakers to provide their name and address before they make comments. When their name is called, if they could press *6 on their phone to activate their microphones. And I just wanted to let everybody know we have a lot of people who would like to speak on this item. That's fantastic. We're going to be using a timer with 3 minutes per public comment. So if you could try to be concise, I have a timer sitting here next to me, and I'll be letting you know when we reach that cutoff. Okay, so with that, the first speaker, I believe, oh, did it just change? No, okay, is, sorry, my list is moving around here. Corey Scher. Is there a Corey Scher on the phone?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good, okay. I'll try to keep my comments to the 3-minute time frame. I think with the other community members on the line, you're going to hear, as Andrea Burke mentioned, a lot of resistance to the recommendation. And for me, as just a member of the community taking a step back, it seems to me that resistance is coming from having lost sight a bit of why we started out to do this in the first place, and that the community's voice really matters in the process, and really that the community was not kind of brought along for that process. So as I understand it, the whole exercise really started to protect an individual property here on Emerson Avenue. And I'm sorry, I should state I'm a quarry share at 4725 Emerson Avenue. And this is really the property that stands out for a lot of us when you walk down the street, because it's one of the 2 or 3 that are largely in their original form. And so those are the houses you kind of think, well, I sure hope that house stays like it is, you know, because it must have been one of the first houses here, and it looks very much like it probably did when it was built. And it was really, I think, to protect that one of those homes from demolition that began this whole process. And so for the resident, you know, we started, I think, with a pretty well-defined scope. And then we had a Q&A for kind of a somewhat ambiguous process that's kind of unfamiliar to us back in October. And then for the resident, for the community member, I'm sorry if other folks on the line can mute themselves. It's hard to even hear myself talk. The next step that we saw was essentially just the final recommendation, with no real opportunity for us to provide input or feedback on, you know, what the criteria should be, what were really the best and most appropriate options to do what we set out to do in this process, and what would be the impacts, et cetera. Basically, the recommendation just didn't reflect our voice or our input or our feedback, and we never really had the opportunity for that. And in that intervening time, the scope of what we were doing here really changed from what we started out to do, which was to protect a property as a community, to something much larger. So I think effectively at this point, again, I think what you're going to hear from the community, there's going to be a lot of different reasons, like, and many of which are people are resistant to what we're doing here. But I would say largely it's because the community feels they were not brought along. They didn't have opportunity to provide input into the process. And now essentially we're being told that just getting this done is more important than what we have to say as a community, or perhaps that we just can't be trusted to provide input or feedback or consider what we're doing here and what really are the best, most appropriate options for getting that done. Those are my comments.
Thank you for your comments, Corey. I am going to move on to the second speaker on the list. Jeffrey Hardy, are you on the line? Press
I am.
6.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yep. Hi, thank you. So, hello, commissioners. My name is Jeff Hardy. I live at 4629 Fremont Avenue South. And I'm going to speak on my own behalf as well as my wife Allison Hardy's behalf tonight. First of all, thanks for your time and for hearing us out. Obviously, this has become a hot topic for our community, and I hope that you'll listen to us tonight with open hearts. I also first want to say that my wife Allison has been working with Andrea Burke and Sheila Venmar, and they've been wonderful to work with. We understand their passion for keeping the historic parts of our city intact. And I know they simply want to preserve history, so do we. Last year, a young couple purchased the house directly behind us on Emerson and attempted to tear it down. And that seems to have brought this potential designation question to a head. At the time, my wife spoke at the meeting and said that we didn't know where we stood on the issue, and there were a few reasons for that. First was what was proposed, at least in our opinion, was uncharacteristic for the neighborhood. Second, we previously lived in Linden Hills for 13 years, and we didn't want to see what happened in Linden Hills from a teardown standpoint to happen in Lyndhurst. And third, the uncertainty that the 2040 plan presented at the time, certainly to us, caused concern that developers may take advantage of our large lots to build multiple multifamily homes that would make, instead of affordable housing, would wind up as a way to make money quickly on the part of developers at the expense of our neighborhood. Since then, I've heard multiple stories from neighbors about the house that was submitted to be torn down, and now wonder if the house would have actually been better that way. I feel for the current owners and everything they face with what's needed. My concerns about developers still exist. However, they're outweighed by my larger concerns of where this initial desire to save a house has gone. For that reason, we oppose this area becoming a historic district on several fronts. First, I question the findings of the study conducted at the direction of this commission, and I assume funded by the taxpayers on this call. The report states that our 60 properties out of the larger areas studied are historically intact. However, if one looks at the records and the homes, you can see that many of the homes in this area have already been altered, including our own, some to the point of total reconstruction or tear down. Second, from the data our neighbor Jennifer Jorgensen provided you, you can see that over 90% of the homeowners that responded to a survey, and over 2/3 responded, do not support the historic designation. The designation creates multiple barriers for people to conduct the work on their homes that they need or want to do. Namely, with the designation, the cost of any construction will go up, timelines will be significantly impacted, and it's worth noting that this, by the way, directly impacted us last summer. We were about to submit plans to the city for a potential addition and renovation to our property. When the plans were reviewed, we were told that it would never pass. We had worked for 2 years on those plans and had already spent thousands of dollars on fees and design work and had to go back to the drawing board. So, we speak to that with some personal experience as well. And finally, over the past 2 weeks, our city obviously has undergone tremendous upheaval. And with the exception of living in New York during 9/11, it's certainly been one of the more unsettling experiences I've ever lived through. As many have stated, the fact that we're even having this conversation right now in the wake of everything else seems absurd, but I also understand resolution may be necessary here. I'm not trying to compare what we're fighting against here with what recent protesters are fighting against. I recognize my privilege in being able to even have this conversation. And I'm not trying to say that my plight with my expensive historic home is even close to what many others are fighting against. That being said, in my opinion, this is an issue of being listened to and heard. This isn't something we asked for, nor is it something that the majority want. Those that do want historic designation should absolutely be allowed to pursue that for their individual properties. As one neighbor said in an email chain, we see ourselves as stewards of these amazing homes, and we do not need the city to control and supervise how we do so. It feels, frankly, patronizing and belittling, whatever the intention. I see this as an issue of retaining personal freedom. Please trust that we love our neighborhood and our homes and will fight to keep them intact while also making sure that we modernize them and make them sustainable for the next 125 years. Thank you for listening to us tonight.
Thank you for your comments, Jeffrey. I'm going to keep things moving along. Our third caller is Brett Hartley. Brett, are you on the line? Brett Hartley, press *6.
Brett Hartley.
Oh, I hear you.
Awesome. Good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to say I appreciate your time and appreciate you being here. I'm here with my wife, Susan Bach. We have been at 4639 Fremont Avenue South for almost 14 years now. And I've been extremely happy to have our new neighbors, Jeff and Allison, next door. And I surely wish them to be able to do what they want to do to their home. Part of this is attracting families and people to the neighborhood that want to stay here. And having the Hardys here is very important. Some of my thoughts were, why now? After a century, I think we've done a pretty good job as stewards of these homes, and it just seems too little too late, so to speak. I don't feel like after 100+ years, we suddenly need governmental oversight to kind of tell us how to take care of our homes. The taxes here, I think we've probably spent over $250,000 in property taxes in the last 14 years, and I would like to, save as much money as I can and put it towards thoughtful rehabilitation of my home, as opposed to spending money on architectural fees and permit fees and spending time, getting things done on my property that I can do on my own. And I think we've proven as 14-year residents that we can do that. I can say that. So, I guess the point being, I would like to respectfully ask that you decide not to designate this as a historic district. We are vehemently opposed for many reasons, and we'd just like to say, please no. Please listen to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Brett. The next speaker on the list is Al Thyssen. Is Al on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry about that. I lost my screen for a second.
That's okay.
My name is Al Thyssen. I'm with Thyssen Homes, Al Thyssen Renovations here in Southwest Minneapolis. I'm a neighbor. I live at 52nd and Oliver here in the city. My company basically does historical replication remodeling here in Southwest Minneapolis. I've spent the last 20 years bringing homes back to life that have been slated for tear down all through Southwest Minneapolis. I am directly involved with 4632 Emerson Avenue South. That's the subject house that started this whole designation in East Harriet. And I'm working with Justin and Autumn, the new owners at 4632 Emerson. And, we now have a buyer or an owner who's willing to make that investment in this house to make the improvements to keep it in the neighborhood. And I know some would even argue that the house should have been torn down, and I'm really happy that the house is being restored. I want to mention too that the previous owners, the Niehuses, they walked away from that project basically because the cost analysis of the new construction they wanted to do there far exceeded what their financial means would allow. So that teardown was not going to happen regardless. They contacted me as a realtor and a developer to sell the house as a historical remodel for the right buyer, and that's the direction that we're going in right now. I would argue that through that whole district there, the chances of it going down to developers, just because of the cost of purchasing homes in that market, because of the larger lots, is pretty unlikely. As a developer myself, to purchase one of those homes and do anything other than try to restore it as close to the original intent of the architecture would be a fool's errand. I don't think there's any profit margin in there, and I think for that reason the district will continue to be preserved. My last concern is just in regards to working with the city about the guidelines. And I know Andrea spoke to the guidelines a little bit in the beginning, but as we've worked with the city as far as what we can and can't do with the home, we're still completely confused as far as what they're going to allow. As a matter of fact, we have no direction on what will be allowed with the exterior work that we can do. City Council members, I hope you've all had a chance to read the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. This is a very imposing document, and in speaking with Andrea, I think she leans more towards going closer to those guidelines, which basically describes archaeological remodeling and bringing back the original materials of the house versus replacing with similar or matching specs with new materials. Lene's memo that she sent out basically told the neighborhood groups that the historic designation does not stop you from making changes to your property. But I fear that if we go too much towards the archaeological designations for remodeling, that it's going to price the remodeling out of range for most of the homeowners in this neighborhood, including the folks that I'm working with right now. We can match the exteriors, keep the window openings. We're keeping all the outside window trim, leaded windows, the stained glass windows, so many of the original artifacts of this home that are so important. But if we take it too far as what the guidelines are going to be, it's going to make a lot of people's lives really miserable in that neighborhood. If we do decide to go through with the historic designation, as far as I can tell right now, there are really no guidelines. I can talk to any person down at the city there, and I'll get a different interpretation of what that's going to mean. In other words, be worried or don't be worried. So I don't know how much longer that's going to take. I think this has been out there for almost a year now, and I don't see that we have proper guidelines for me to be able to do the work in that neighborhood for the homeowners. So that's my say. I think I covered a lot of ground there. Like I said, I'm just all about trying to maintain the integrity of our neighborhoods, and I'm just glad that we've got somebody in that house now who is of like mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. The next speaker is a Robert Bach. Is Robert online? Robert Bach, press *6. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. Bach. Do we know if they're still on the line? Nope, they've left the call. Okay, the name after that then. Sorry, it takes a moment to load. Jim Lawrence. Is Jim Lawrence on the line?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jim Lawrence. I live at 4415. East Lake Harriet, so I'm outside of the proposed district. I take great sympathy with those who live in the district who oppose being designated as a historic district for the reasons that have been stated. However, I would ask the commissioners to ask themselves the following question and come to the conclusion based on their answer to this question. We have just had $1.5 billion. Let me repeat, $1.5 billion of arson in South Minneapolis, destroying hundreds of businesses. We have had a city council which has, as a majority, said they wish to abolish our police department, or at least change it in very, very fundamental ways, which are unknown to the citizens of Minneapolis. I would ask the commissioners whether turning this neighborhood into a historical district will make it more or less likely that people will want to live in Minneapolis given those two events. $1.5 billion of property destroyed in South Minneapolis, and the possibility of the police being abolished to serve the residents of South Minneapolis. So I would ask you to make the decision based on whether you think designating this area as a historical district would make us more or less attractive for people to come into the city. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attention.
Thank you for your comments, Jim. Our next speaker is Sarah Gillette. Is Sarah on the line? Nope, she's also left the meeting. Okay. Is Tim Hart Anderson on the line?
I am on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Tim Hart Anderson. My wife Beth and I live at 4750. We live at 4753 Emerson Avenue South in the proposed district. I wish to speak against the proposed designation. The conversation thus far and the study undertaken, while extensive and impressive in terms of its description of the homes we live in, is entirely based on architecture. And a neighborhood is a lot more than just a collection of buildings and aggregation of architecture. It is fundamentally a community. And I'm more interested in the human history, the social history of our neighborhood, frankly, than I am the architectural history. Now, the demographics of this neighborhood today were determined long ago, 100 years ago, when many of these homes were being built, when there were restrictive covenants in Southwest and South Minneapolis and neighboring western suburbs, which determined that this would be a largely almost all white neighborhood even still today. Those restrictive covenants excluded blacks and Jews and others from purchasing property in this area. In fact, my research shows that there is one, and I think maybe two homes in our district that had restrictive covenants on them. In addition to that, the federal government's homeowners loan corporation 100 years ago was making loans based on maps of cities all across America, and those maps graded the neighborhoods in terms of the risk of moving there or lending to those who would move there. And that's where the term red line came in, because the areas marked by red lines were graded D, hazardous. Our area, the very district you're hoping to preserve in this historic designation, was graded A, the best. This is not history we need or want to preserve. As a matter of fact, it's history that we need to renounce, repudiate, and break ourselves away from. The historic designation, to me, sounds like restrictive covenants or redlining by another name. And I, for one, do not want to be part of a neighborhood that would embrace the mistakes of the past and preserve those into the future. So I'm particularly in this 2.5 weeks we've had now, I'm adamantly opposed to doing this, as is my wife. And I'm also delighted with our neighborhood. We're glad to be stewards of the home we have. We love its history. We admire the neighborhood greatly, but we do not admire the history, the social history, the human history of this part of Minneapolis, and want nothing to do with preserving it. So I speak against this, and I'm glad that you've heard that 90% of the neighbors of the 90% of the 66 have put themselves on record as against this. I don't know why you would even consider it any further after hearing that, let alone with some of the arguments that we've been making. So thank you for hearing me, and appreciate your work for the city of Minneapolis.
Thank you for your comments. The Next registered caller is Stefan Hartung. Stefan, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you, commissioners, for hearing us, and thank you, Andrea, for setting us up and accurately mirroring what we were saying in the meeting last week. I want to continue to what Tim just said about the neighborhood. One thing that Andrea, I think, misrepresented is that she labeled this neighborhood as a middle-class neighborhood. I think this is not a middle-class neighborhood. It never was. If you think about it as the name colony, elite colony, where people went here because their boss or friend sold them a piece of land that they could build on, that is not middle class. I know for sure that my house in 1919, the second owner was the Nash brothers, who founded the Nash Finch Company. Those were very, very rich people. If my house has maid stairs, that means this is an elite house. I think in this time, like Tim said, it's an embarrassment to celebrate white privilege and designate it to be, again, a predominantly white neighborhood and set that sign. I think that just hurts the city of Minneapolis, that hurts the people who live here, and makes us embarrassed. I'm an immigrant from Germany. I came here with nothing. I work for everything, but I'm also have never growing up experienced this kind of white privileged racism that's inherent within this society. I really ask you guys to consider making a difference, not celebrating elitism, but celebrating America and the diversity of America. And the other thing about America, I think that is very, very important, is that there's progress. If we make this historic and don't give people the opportunity to change their houses to become a better city, then you guys are doing something wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Before you go, could you give your address for the record?
Oh, sorry, 4752 across the street from Tim.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. The next speaker on the line is Laura Hamilton.
I'm Laura Hamilton. I'm at 4612 Fremont Avenue South, which is Aces. Hi, I'm Laura Hamilton. I'm at 4612 Fremont Avenue South. For full disclosure, we sold our house and we're moving 12 blocks north. On May 25th, the murder of George Floyd exposed the systematic and systemic racism rampant throughout Minneapolis. On May 25th, I believe your job should have permanently changed. Please do not continue business as usual. Please do not argue this doesn't apply to you. Please stop preserving the community's unique identity, culture, and character by protecting significant historic resources from the city's past without fully understanding the role of systematic and systemic racism, without understanding how beautiful homes and neighborhoods were built, on whose backs, protected by whose white laws and practices. This is not as simple as Southern plantations built on the backs of indentured Black slaves. Northern racism is much more subtle. The deceitful confiscation of Native American land, the granting of triple lots to respected white people like Arthur and Maud Armitage on the condition they build large homes costing no more than $3,000. The use of white privilege to block access to Lake Harriet at 46th Street to keep neighborhood streets quiet and free of outsiders. The decades of discriminatory lending and real estate practices to keep people of color out. Do not think that designating a historic Black church in North Minneapolis balances the scale. Please suspend all CPED recommendations until a comprehensive review of discriminatory and exclusionary practices can be performed and the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents are fully heard. I asked the Heritage Preservation Commission and City Council to suspend all heritage preservation actions until a thorough review of discriminatory and exclusionary practices can be performed and the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents are fully heard. Please do not delay. The time is now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Laura. The next speaker on the line is Pat Zomer.
Thank you. This is Pat Zomer. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Pat Zomer. My wife and I live at 4700 DuPont, and we oppose the creation of the Lyndhurst Historic District. The city has committed itself to eliminating racial and economic disparities and has recognized the importance of zoning regulation in meeting that goal. Following the murder of George Floyd, community members have spoken out en masse, calling for real, meaningful change. This vote is your first opportunity to show that you mean it. Or it can be another example of actions failing to live up to the city's expressed principles. Those principles are expressed in the Minneapolis 2040 plan, the primary goals of which include eliminating racial and economic disparities and providing affordable and accessible housing. Authorizing the historic district directly undermines these goals. The homes in the district will be more expensive to own, as homeowners will be required to maintain their properties in accordance with city regulations rather than economic efficiency. Further, there are additional regulatory burdens and associated costs tied to owning a home in a neighborhood with a historic designation. Increasing the cost of owning homes in this neighborhood undermines the ability to gain economic diversity, entrenches wealthy, white homeowners, and reestablishes exclusionary zoning that Minneapolis 2040 was intended to dismantle. Empirical evidence confirms that historic preservation restricts housing supply, thereby increasing housing prices. Empirical evidence also suggests that historic district is likely to entrench wealthy white homeowners, also reestablishing exclusionary zoning. I recognize we heard earlier that market forces likely mean the houses in this neighborhood will continue to be expensive to purchase, and thus the neighborhood is likely to be economically and racially isolated. But the question here is whether the city is going to actually enshrine those policies in its regulations. Minneapolis 2040 seemed to say no. That as a city, Minneapolis is committed to eliminating regulations that perpetuate systemic oppression. Recent events show that words are not enough. It is time for you to act. Please reject this historic district. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Pat. I believe our next caller is Margot Struthers. Margot, are you on the line? Press *6.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Margot Struthers. Am I on now?
Yep.
Okay. Hello. This is Margot Struthers. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I live at 4621 Fremont Avenue South, and my husband and I strongly support the designation. I submitted a 3-page memorandum in writing, and the hour is late. I'm not going to go over all of what I said, but I do think that the staff's analysis, along with their consultant of the district, meets the various guidelines, and in particularly the block that we live on, which is the original block with 11 houses on it, 9 of which were constructed in 1893. Most of them have been expanded and upgraded, but from the front, they look a lot like the old pictures that have been included in the consultant's report. The other 2 points that I wanted to make is I agree that there should be a delay. As other people have said, significant things have happened here in the last month, both the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, and it would seem that it would be desirable, particularly from the City Council's point of view, to focus on more urgent matters right now. And finally, I think that, as has been said earlier, particularly by the gentleman who is a rehabilitator of property, that there needs to be some clear guidelines. I mean, people have been in the neighborhood have been sharing emails saying that they had to maintain a window and a shower and have to rehab old crumbling siding and that kind of thing. And the neighborhood needs to understand that. And so my suggestion would be to delay. I had suggested 6 to 12 months, but I understand from what Andrea said that 6 months may be the longest period of time that could be delayed, and really talk about what would these guidelines be, because we have lived here for almost 40 years, and back in 1992 we added a large addition on the back of our house. We attached our garage. We've done a number of things that aren't so visible from the front, and I think maybe that's really the key, is what does it look like to someone walking down the street? I would be very disappointed if one of the houses on our block turned into a triplex. I just have to say that. It's not going to be affordable. It may not even be financially viable, according to an earlier speaker. But I think that's the issue. It's not, do we trust the neighbors who are here, but what happens when people buy it and decide they want to make a triplex? That will destroy the character of this particular block. I mean, it could be a row house. It could take up most of these triple lots. We are on this block on triple lots. So I think that's a significant danger. And for that reason, too, I think that just understanding what the appropriate guidelines for implementation of the recommendation would be. I think there may be, some people obviously are never going to be in favor of it, but some who could more clearly understand what they could do with their property and what the process is might turn out to be more supportive. So I really think a delay would be in order. And thank you very much for taking the time and for listening to these comments.
Thank you for your comments, Margot. It looks like we have one person left on the call. Is Jim Lawrence on the call?
I've already spoken. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. You've already spoken. I thought so. Is there anybody else in the queue that wished to speak that has not already spoken? If so, please press *6. Okay, it sounds like we've gotten through everybody. Thank you. It's really great to have people coming to give public testimony. I know this virtual format is a little challenging for everybody, and I really appreciate that you took the time to still come and give your comments virtually. With that, I will close the public hearing and open this up to commissioner discussion. Are there concerns and comments on the proposed application? Does somebody want to start this conversation off?
Okay, I'll be brave.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack.
Thank you all to everybody who spoke. So the study was, I think,
Linda, I don't think your camera's on yet.
Oh, sorry. Is that okay?
There you are.
So the study was compelling, made a very good case. I was very pleased that they had reduced the boundaries. It made a lot more sense in all sorts of ways. A historic district of 200 houses is really kind of overwhelming. And there's a lot of, obviously, under the kind of ways that we've been operating, this historic district makes a lot of sense. Then there is the question of whether the people who live there are interested in having a historic district, and it's not a referendum, yet that is an important concern, because it's kind of a compact between the people who live there and the city. So there should be some kind of a comfort level with it. And when this started out, it seemed that there was some support in the neighborhood and that was probably triggered by the idea of that a house was going to be torn down. So you can understand that. It seems that just proceeding to designate the district, though I think it clearly meets our criteria, would be a difficult move at this time. And I'm wondering if we could talk about a way to try to discuss the guidelines with the community and give it some time and see if with that there would be more enthusiasm. So that's just a thought about it. So that's where I am thinking.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. It looks like Commissioner Sandbolt would like to speak.
Hi. I just kind of wanted to share some of my thoughts. I would say that this is a neighborhood whose built character I think is worth preserving as a record of an architectural style and building craft. And we can't control who buys the properties or their intentions with the properties in a neighborhood, which kind of gets to some of our last public comments. Our only way to do that is to designate the neighborhood as a historic district. And guidelines would be created with input from the property owners in the area. But that being said, I also sympathize with the owners in the area who want the freedom to maintain their property as they deem fit. And if the property owners feel that they do not need protection from developers tearing down homes in their area, or if they don't feel like they need protection from homes in the area deteriorating beyond repair, then I kind of tend to believe that we should not impose something on them that they do not believe is necessary. So those are kind of some of my thoughts on it. I do feel like this would be a little rushed in light of some of the things that are weighing on us. But I generally start to think that if the majority of property owners in this area don't feel that it's necessary, I don't think it's something we should impose on them. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. It looks like Commissioner Kling would like to speak.
Hi. So I have some mixed feelings about this proposed historic district. I do think that the architecture here is definitely what would be making it significant. And I definitely see a strong case that that alone is worth protecting and has cultural value. However, I do sympathize with some of the residents who spoke that mentioned how this is a wealthy white neighborhood where we would be also like preserving a history that in many ways problematic. And I don't think that necessarily disqualifies that this should be a historic district. But I question if this is the kind of district that we want to be prioritizing right now, especially in the light of the murder of George Floyd. I also do agree that we have to, I think it is a strong priority for us to consider the ways that systemic racism play a role in historic preservation and in the policies that we set as the Minneapolis HPC. And I would like to have some consideration on whether making this a historic district would in fact reinforce racial segregation and economic segregation in this area of the city. So I would probably support delaying this item in consideration of all of these other things, which I think we should also consider within the upcoming months.
Thank you, Commissioner Kling. Commissioner Stady, you're up next.
Yes, so, on one hand, the, there's the architecture is there. You would preserve the integrity with the designation. You would avoid what happened to Fulton and Linden Hills with the tear downs. But I live in Tangletown, and we're right by you over there. And, we saw a lot of red signs against the 2040 plan in Lyndhurst and saw some here too. And our neighborhood is just is worthy of historic designation. But I think consistency for me is important right now. When we had the conservation district come up in front of us, that's near Bede-Makaska, I voted against it, and I was pretty diplomatic about how I talked about it. But if we talk about it again, I would have to talk about how it preserves a pocket of white privilege, mostly, is what it is, and that's what this does too. And I used to live in a different part of the city, and I have to say that the white privilege and the entitlement of Southwest Minneapolis can be quite exhausting at sometimes. And I don't think I can support this. I need to be consistent. And I actually wonder if we should be putting a moratorium on residential historic districts for a lot of the things that Commissioner Kling has said. I agree. So I would not support designating this historic.
Thank you, Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Vanderick?
Thank you, Chair. So I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm going to try not to repeat the other commissioners' thoughts too much. I'll start by saying that I am in support of us delaying this decision for right now. I want to underscore for the callers, I hope are still on and listening to this discussion, that all of your commissioners that you're listening to, we're all Minneapolis residents. So the things that you described and the things that you've gone through, we're right there with you. And I want you guys to know that this has been an incredibly difficult time for me personally. I live in the Lyndale neighborhood, and it's been really hard. And so to that end, I wanted to just make mention of the fact that we're going to have a conversation at the end of this meeting about exactly this, like how can the HPC better support our racial inequities and getting rid of them in our communities and working towards that. And I don't think we've done a good enough job in preservation as an industry. And I know I personally have not done enough. So I just wanted to say that I want to push back on this idea that preservation and historic districts somehow, one of the comments that was made that really struck me and scared me, honestly, was this idea that maybe preservation, a historic district might be similar to the idea of early redlining or anything like that. And I feel very strongly that that is not the case. Preservation is something I've advocated for in my entire adult life. And it's a lot of, I've had to do a lot of thought about what that means in a community that I've existed in of white privilege, and what does preservation mean? And I'm not saying I have the answers, but I am saying that we have so few tools to preserve the history and the character of our communities and tell the story of what has happened in our communities. And historic districts are just one of them, and honestly, probably the most powerful. So that's why we lean on it. I think that it's worth us having more discussions. I also wanted to make mention, which I know that I think Commissioner Sample touched on too, the guidelines would be forthcoming. What we asked staff to do was to explore a historic district. They did that. We have a report that makes a really strong case for historic district for what traditionally has made up a historic district. So now the question would be, if we approve it, what are the guidelines? What are the what decisions get to be made about that? And I also want to make clear that historic guidelines are not set in stone rules, and that's why we exist. We are the stewards of this historic story of our city, and we take that very seriously in evaluating every single decision that we make as to whether or not the impact of the decision that we make will erode the story and the historic presence of our community. And so I just wanted to really say to the callers that this is not a question of whether or not we understand the systemic racism issues in our community, especially in Minneapolis, because we do. I promise you we do. I think what we're grappling with is how do we tell the stories of Black, Indigenous, people of color in our communities while also preserving the architecture that in some part may have added to that oppression. And I'm struggling with that. I know my other commissioners are too. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. That's all I have. Like I said, I think as far as the motion or the question of the motion that's before us right now, I think that it would be most appropriate for us to delay a decision today and have some more discussion, provide some more opportunity for community engagement. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Der Eyck. I think we've all been thinking that this is going to be a very difficult issue, and that this particular application really puts a spotlight on the systemic issues that the city is facing at this time. I wanted to get a little clarification if staff member Andrea Burke could answer a question. I'm wondering about the guidelines. I know sometimes we develop guidelines concurrently with the staff report for designation, but I realized that a consultant was used for this designation study. So I'm wondering how staff would feel about delaying a vote on this item and getting some preliminary guidelines worked up with residents, if that could alleviate some fears. Andrea, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can make some comments. I also wanted to note, I believe Commissioner Howard also wanted to speak, but I can also answer your question. We, as staff, serve you as the commission, so we will, our feelings are, I want to say irrelevant. You know, of course we have feelings, but it is your decision, and we will move in a direction that you choose. And if that is to designate this district today, if it is to not designate this district today, or if it is to continue and vote to delay or extend interim protection for a period of time so that design guidelines can be drafted, that is we will work with that as well. It is very much your decision as the public body that has been appointed to make these decisions.
From your community engagement thus far, does it seem like a fair number of the concerns would be addressed with the guidelines? I guess that was part of my take off the phone calls, was that people didn't quite understand what the guidelines would entail, so they couldn't have really an informed opinion on the district.
I think to a degree, for some residents, as the last caller addressed, that it may help them understand what this means and what it would look like. And to others, I think they have their strong opinions, and that's okay. And it may not change their mind. And I think that is part of what is the difficult decision before you, to move either in for or against or delay this particular decision.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Well, I think that the question you just asked of Andrea kind of was the direction I was headed. I don't feel comfortable recommending this district for designation tonight. I firmly believe in community support for designations, especially now. And I would support delaying this decision for 6 months if that community engagement could continue around the designation. I think this is a fairly solid district based on the designation criteria we have before us now. New History did a great job of taking a huge district and distilling it down to what is truly the core historic properties. It was a huge task in a really short period of time, and so they should be commended. But I do believe that community support is necessary, and my fellow commissioners have already voiced all the reasons why already. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there anybody else who would like to speak generally to this, or does somebody want to make a motion? I'm wondering if we are leaning towards delaying a vote, how long we think it needs to be delayed so that some guidelines and additional community engagement could take place. And I know we have limits on how long we can delay things. Andrea, do you have an answer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to give you some more information about what is allowed under the ordinance in terms of continuing. So there's a few options that you can choose from, and I will confess this is a little uncharted territory. It happened once before, about 10 years ago for Prospect Park, which I was not here for, but I am drawing from that experience. And also, just as an FYI to you, would need to consult further with council on this. But option one, you can decide to let interim protection run out, which would be done on July 30th, 2020. You can choose to continue this decision a cycle or two, which would put us into July, and that would happen, and then we could make the decision there. A couple cycles just to continue and then make a decision is not enough time to draft guidelines, I will confess, but that is an option. The other option you can do is, I'm going to read from the ordinance here, but when interim protection is put on, basically the ordinance says interim protection may be extended for such additional periods as the commission may deem appropriate and necessary to protect the designation process, not exceeding a total period of 18 months. The commission shall hold a public hearing on a proposed extension of interim protection as provided in section 599.170, which is the outlines for how to hold a public hearing. That said, I do know that Prospect Park decided to held a separate public hearing to vote on an extension of interim protection. I'm not sure exactly if you can vote at this particular meeting to extend it today, as we would want to outline the reasons and your findings from this meeting. One possible suggestion is to continue this one cycle to the next meeting to then vote on extending interim protection for 6 months, if that is an option, something that the commission would like to go in. I believe 6 months would be an adequate time frame to conduct additional community engagement and to come up with draft design guidelines with the residents and neighborhood, and may have more information and give them more information and input as to what this means. So in terms of your question about time frame, yes, I believe an additional 6 months, but you don't have to do 6 months. You can choose to do several months as well. It's really at your discretion. It's just not to exceed a period of 18 months per the ordinance.
Thank you, Andrea. Commissioner Stady?
Well, I think that answered all my questions, but I guess I'd like to make the observation that Prospect Park was never designated. And the sense I get from these residents that spoke with us today is that they would like interim protection to end. So I would be in support of ending interim protection.
I guess in response to that, my concern is, I know we had a lot of people speaking out against this. My concern is always that when the staff report recommends approval, that anybody who is supporting it might assume that since staff is supporting it, they might be less inclined to come speak in favor of it. And so my concern is that often when we have public hearings like this, we get people who are opposed to the staff recommendation. And that's just sort of a part of the nature of public engagement meetings like this. I guess my personal feelings on it is that maybe continuing one cycle so that staff can look at what this would take in order to extend interim protections and provide time for engagement and guideline development. My inclination would be that the interim protection should be limited to just the 66 properties, not the initial 216. That seems excessive now that they've narrowed the field of the study. But I understand that we could also just let this go if we don't think it's appropriate this time. Are there other commissioners who would like to speak on this item?
Well, I would certainly want to understand what the implications were for letting interim protection run out, and whether that might mean that that's really the end of the process. So, Madeline, I think what you're proposing is a very wise course and allows the staff time to check with council and kind of get that all in line. Interim protection is a burden. It's also a test. I mean, it certainly allows the neighborhood a chance to see what the process is. And I'm sorry to hear that it hasn't seemed to be a very positive process, but you know, in general, people are never going to want any more regulation than they have to have. So we have to kind of keep that in mind too. So Madeline, I think you're on a good path to continue for a cycle or two, if necessary, to really develop the next step here. But I agree that the interim protection should only apply to the 66 houses, and that should be clear.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Andrea, does continuing to the June 23rd meeting provide staff with enough time to talk to council?
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot coming at our council right now with a lot of the issues in Minneapolis, but I mean, this is a priority too, and we will do our best to put together the information to outline, this is if you choose to vote on it, what this would mean to extend it, what the implications would be, and what we're looking at going forward. But to address Commissioner Stady's comment, yes, you are correct. Prospect Park was ultimately not designated.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, at the next meeting then you would be bringing a new staff recommendation that would be to extend interim protection and work on guidelines or something. Okay.
I believe so. So this is where I have to look at the calendar and calculate everything. As I mentioned, this is a little uncharted territory, but we have deadlines for reports and noticing and publications and so on and so forth. And we're long past some of that for the June 23rd hearing, but this is where I would need to consult with council as to what is allowable and within the HPC's powers in terms of this matter is going forward.
Would it be best for us to continue to the July meeting then?
Sounds like it.
I will let the commission discuss that. I see both sides of that. I see that allowing more time for us to put this together, but I also see, quite frankly, more burden on the property owners, especially for those who are outside of the proposed district boundaries, and even for those inside the proposed district boundaries that are left uncertain as to what is going to happen going forward. I will also let you know we are getting into the council's not off season, but things get a little bit more spread out on the council's calendar going forward due to summer and then new meetings and committees going on. So that's just something else to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, after all this, I'm trying to see. Commissioner Howard, are you up to speak? I've lost track of the count.
Yeah, I was going to make a motion to continue this item for, I was going to say 2 cycles, but now with what Ms. Burke just said, I think I'll start with just one cycle so that we can figure out what kind of options we have for doing an extension of the interim protections. And I'm not sure what kind of format that motion needs to be written in. So if anyone would like to assist with that, I'm open for that too.
I think it's simply that you move to continue this item for one cycle.
Which is what I said, so that works, right?
I think you're fine.
Okay.
Commissioner Van der Eyck seconds that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Van der Eyck. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Stady.
No.
Van der Eyck.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
So that's 8 yay, 1 nay.
Thank you. That motion passes. That item will be continued, and we'll check back with you on that, Andrea, at the next meeting. That concludes our public hearing items. Moving on to the announcements, I know a new business. I know that commissioners had a lot of things they wanted to discuss. I guess if I could start with Andrea, do we have potential dates for the retreat? That seems like maybe a good starting place for new business.
Yes, I have a few new business items to relay to you, the first being retreat dates. Among the few that I have put together, we also have noticing requirements when commissioners get together. So I've proposed at this point keeping our regular Tuesday time slot, but on an off week to do July 7th, potentially starting at 4:30, or on July 21st, starting at 4:30. It would be in a virtual format. The rules are kind of similar for how we hold these meetings, where the public is allowed to invited to participate should they so choose. But that, as I mentioned when I canceled the initial retreat back in April, that I would check in with you guys in June or July should the pandemic still be going on, and propose new dates. I'm following up on that. Forgive me, I should have said that first. But at this point, I propose July 7th, a Tuesday at 4:30, or July 21st, a Tuesday at 4:30, keeping the regular kind of time slot that this group meets. But I am open to other dates. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. I'm wondering if we could kind of do this like a commissioner roll call if July 7th at 4:30 works for you. Rachel, if you wouldn't mind just calling everybody's name, that would be great.
Sure. Just to be clear, should I, to eliminate multiple roll calls, should we just go through the list and people state their preferences, if that works for you, Chair?
Yes, I think that would be fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. So in that case, Bjornberg, what do you think?
Either works for me. I have no preference.
Thanks. Howard.
Either date works for me as well.
Thank you. Johnson.
Only July 7th works for me. Sorry.
That's what we're here to know. Thank you. Kling.
July 7th for me.
Right. Mac.
Either works. Thank you.
Thanks. Sandbolt.
Either works for me.
Stady.
Only July 21st works for me.
Vandryke.
Either works for me, but may I suggest for our discussion considering starting earlier? I mean, we haven't had a retreat in a really long time, and I think we're going to have a lot to discuss, and so I think it would be worth giving ourselves as much time as possible. So, but either day works. Thanks.
Thank you. Sundberg.
Either date would work for me. I would, yes, push for July 7th, and it sounds like July 7th works for more people than, is that true, Rachel?
Yes, I'd say, unfortunately, Commissioner Stady is the only one who stated that he wouldn't be able to make the July 7th meeting.
Commissioner Stady, would you be able to make July 7th if it was at a different time, or is the whole day?
No, I'm on vacation. Yeah, so I won't be able to.
I understand. As for Commissioner Vandryke's concern about the time, I would be open to moving it earlier, but I'm wondering if that would cause conflicts for other commissioners. I know we often have 4:30 on Tuesdays just set aside. If we moved it, I know some of the other ones we've started at, say, 3 o'clock. Would anybody have a conflict with 3 o'clock on the 7th? Other than Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Stady, you have a question.
Could we cancel one of our existing meetings and make it a retreat instead?
I think
we cannot.
We cannot? Okay. I think we have people lined up for meetings already at this point, and that's where it gets difficult. Commissioner Vandryke, would moving the meeting to 3 o'clock address your concern with the time?
Seems, I mean, I think earlier the better. It seems to make sense to me as long as it doesn't conflict with anybody's schedules. It doesn't with mine, so.
Staff can accommodate that should the rest of the commission be in agreement.
Thank you, staff. I'm wondering if, does this require a vote? Do we need a motion to hold the retreat on July 7th at 3 p.m.?
To be completely honest, I don't know, but it might be easier in order to get in this virtual format concurrence on the matter.
Does somebody want to make such a motion?
Howard moves that.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there a second?
Second, Mac.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Rachel, would you call the roll?
Gladly. Bjornberg.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Mac.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Or Sandbolt. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
Stady.
Aye.
Vandryke.
Aye.
And Sundberg.
Aye.
Thank you. That's
Fantastic. Okay, retreat is set for July 7th at 3 p.m. Commissioner Stady will let you know what excitement happens. Andrea, were there other items from staff that you wished to discuss at this time?
Yeah, I have a couple quick other things to mention just before we get into some other new business brought up by the commissioners. Just as an FYI, we can talk about more about this at the retreat, but staff is in the process of updating our signage guidelines. I am calling them sign guidelines 2.0, but that is just an FYI that we are working on that. And we will ask for more input at the meeting. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention that I think will lead into our next discussion, staff has applied for several grants to do more survey and context and community engagement work on several topics. One being a CLG grant to do a follow-up to our modernism context, which should be ready any day here. I'm just waiting on word from the consultant to get the final draft and final product, but it would be a reconnaissance survey following up on that, on modern, I'll just say modernism. I can just explain more in the retreat as well. But another one I really wanted to bring up to you in this format is that back in January, we applied for an African American Cultural Heritage Fund grant to conduct community engagement for Minneapolis in preparation for an African American context study. I am aware that we have not been awarded the grant yet, but we have passed the first round and should be hearing back in July on whether or not we were awarded that grant, and I am hopeful. That is all my updates. I will leave it open to commissioners to bring up new business. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but Claire, Commissioner Van Der Eyck, it sounded like you had some specific items in mind you wanted to bring up as new business.
I did, yes. Thank you. I realize that our retreat will act as a more robust format for us to have some of these discussions, but I feel very strongly that now is the time for us to start the conversation regardless. And so what I really wanted to do was talk about some of the ideas that have been rattling around in my head. I'd like to hear the rest of the commission's thoughts on those ideas. I'd also like to really ask all of us to treat the retreat as a deadline, as a due date for actionable steps that we can take to better support cultural and racial diversity in the city of Minneapolis. I think that it's clear, it's been clear that our city is woefully inequipped to support racial diversity. This is something that I think all of us know, all of us being professionals and experts in this field, particularly in preservation in the United States, is woefully lacking, where we are not preserving the stories of our immigrant and Black community at the same rate that we are preserving the stories of our white history. And that's just a fact. And it's a really uncomfortable one to acknowledge. The discussion today, I think, really highlights that. It also, this is something that we've talked about a couple of times before. We talked about it at retreats. The fact that we have so few tools in our toolbox as preservationists. And unfortunately, some of those tools start to kind of create and support these same structures that are really continuing the level of oppression in our communities. And we have a responsibility in that, and I have responsibility in that, in not only in my role as commissioner, but I have a responsibility of that as a real estate developer doing work in this community. I need to do better at ensuring that the work that I am doing is including the voices of people of color in our community, and we need to do better as a commission to do that too. So we can all sit here and complain about it and talk about it and feel bad about it, and I've done that for the last 2 weeks. It's been great, but I think we should instead come up with some actionable steps, right? So we, as I'm sure everybody is familiar, there's a lot of discussion right now about funding for the Minneapolis Police Department and what that might continue to look like. I don't really want to get into a discussion of whether or not abolishing the police department or defunding the police department is a good decision or any of that. I think that's wildly outside of our purview. That said, when it comes to government budgets, that is something that we should have a say in. If money is diverted from the Minneapolis Police Department, then we as a commission should formally request to the city council that money is then provided in a fund or a pot to preserve the stories of our Black, Indigenous, people of color in this community, to really actively target dollars to that. How that looks and what the structure is that, I think we can help work with staff to figure that out. But I think that if money is diverted from MPD, we need to make sure as a community as a whole that the money is diverted to places that the community actually needs. And one of those places, I believe, is preserving and telling the stories of our Black, Indigenous, people of color in the community. That was one of my ideas. Obviously, I think Andrea touched on this already, about how can we seek out context studies of exactly those stories and the built environment and how that has played in those stories, what role the built environment has played in the stories of our Black, Indigenous, people of color, our immigrants. You know, we have such a rich history of that in the city of Minneapolis, and I think unfortunately in large part our landmarks are not reflecting that. So, you know, what landmarks exist out there that are not currently landmark status that we can ask staff to study for exactly that. I think a great place to start with that would be the Minneapolis Music History Study that was done, I believe in 2018 by the CPED staff. That's, you know, there's just so much within that study alone of the built environment that has had a direct impact on our Black community particularly, you know, so what buildings there can we support landmark designation for and ensure that those stories are told in a really large way. The other idea I had that I think is a little bit more nuanced and probably not inside, and you know, I'll apologize, I probably should have done this at the beginning. I'm not good with this like governmental process stuff, you know, like I studied a little bit in grad school. I know it just enough to be dangerous. So some of this stuff, maybe it's not the role of the HPC, maybe it's just the role of each individual one of us as Minneapolis constituents with an expertise and a knowledge in how to preserve history. And so maybe that's what I'm asking of our commission now, is that each one of you take that responsibility seriously. But I had this thought that maybe we could, the HPC and Preserve Minneapolis, perhaps even the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, Rethos, could work to create opportunities for our Black, Indigenous, people of color, as well as our immigrant population in the city of Minneapolis to come and tell their stories, and for us to record them for perpetuity. You know, have like what effectively I'm thinking is like a listening session of storytelling, and maybe that happens at like a TEDx type forum or something like that, that we can help support, that we can provide our knowledge and our background to help people tell the stories that aren't getting told enough right now. The other idea that's out there that I know there's a lot of different organizations that are working on right now, and I'm sure there are individuals at the staff level at the city of Minneapolis that are actively working on, is the public art that has come up as a result of our storefronts needing to be boarded up, and how we can play a role in ensuring that that art is taken care of in one way or the other. And I'll clarify one thing that I have on that quick, and then open it up to others. But this is a journey that I am on. I imagine everyone is, of challenging the way my immediate reaction to things. Right. So I'm a real estate developer. I saw buildings being burned down, and I'm a preservationist. I saw 100-year-old buildings being burned down, and I had a specific reaction to that. And I had to challenge that reaction. One of that reaction is like, oh, well, I need to step in now. You know, as a real estate developer, I need to go find a way that I can step in and help. And I've had a lot of really awesome conversations in just over the past week about how that's not the role I need to play at all. I need to do what I can to support and be there to uplift, but I specifically as a professional in this industry need to find Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrant communities that know how to do real estate development. There's architects, real estate developers, there's engineers, all of them out in our community, in our industry that are working, that they need this opportunity more than ever to get to be a part of that, be a part of that building. And so that's one of the things that I thought about with the art. My immediate plot with the art was, okay, well, MHS, right? MHS should step in and preserve the art. Well, I read a blog post that was fascinating about why would a white-run nonprofit be the one to preserve the art that is being completed about this? And maybe some communities might not want to preserve that art. And that should be a decision made by the communities within which that the art resides. So then if that's not the case, then, you know, how can we, if it's plywood, it's a building material, how else can we use it? You know, can we collect the plywood? Let's say that there are communities that don't want to use it. Can we collect it and use it in rebuilding some of our governmental buildings that were destroyed, like the post office? Things like this that I don't know, you know, but these are just things that are rattling around in my head. But I just really, really want us to be thinking about this dynamically and less strictly within the roles of us as commissioners, but also in the roles of industry professionals, of which we all are as well. So interested to hear your thoughts. Again, I know we can have a much more nuanced conversation during the retreat, but I really wanted to start it now. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Der Eyck. It looks like Commissioner Stady would like to speak.
Yeah, so since I won't make the retreat, so I come from a very white profession, a very white institution, a white supremacist institution, the public library. So speaking from that perspective, we've done racial equity training. And we've looked at using a racial equity tool to examine our racist policies and look at ways to fix them. I think that could be helpful for our group. My concern, I think, you know, we get caught up a lot, and I think one of the people that spoke today about the stuff being destroyed, the important stuff. But I think we as commission, and it's not usually we think about it first, but I think we really need to get people focused and look at what's racist about our policies. How can we get the voices of people of color involved, whether it's letting renters talk about a conservation district, or because the vast majority of homeowners are white in Minneapolis. Or how do we make the Heritage Preservation Commission look more like the racial diversity of our city? So those are my concerns, and I think that racial equity training at the public library gave us a baseline. There were aha moments for people, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and I totally hear what Commissioner Van Der Eyck is talking about, but yeah, I get a sense that it's time to make serious changes, and I think, yeah, we'll have to look outside of the box that we usually look at. But those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Stady. I participated in some racial equity training that the neighborhood organization I was part of did, and I agree that it can be a really useful starting point. And I don't know if that's something that the city supports commissions doing. If it's not, maybe it is something they should support commissions doing, because I think this is a problem that we see on the Heritage Preservation Commission, but the Planning Commission, you know, like there's lots of commissions in the city that might benefit from something like that. So I see you, Commissioner Howard, but I'm just gonna ask Andrea quick, does the city ever provide racial equity training for city commissions?
I'm not sure about the whole commissions. I'm going to say possibly. I have attended a racial equity training. There is a new, I don't know what the right word is, racial equity impact statement is something that is being implemented to add, it is a program that's being implemented to request for committee action, request for council action. Forgive me if I said that wrong. It is a very good program to get the city to look at more diverse and racial, just look at those decisions in the light of that larger context when they are making new policies and bringing new items up. I can look further into it in terms of training for commissions or what that group, who I think now has an enormous amount of work, but I think they've they're willing to do reaching out and see what options there may be to provide you, and get back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. I think it would be useful to maybe pass it up the line that we want to engage with that. We want to be better about this. And if there is training that the city would support commissioners having, that I think we'd all be happy to look at the applications we see in a more diverse way if there are additional skills we can bring to that. Commissioner Howard.
I agree with what everyone has already said, so I'm not going to reiterate all of that. I did have the need for racial equity training and implicit bias training on my list of things that I think we need to do. So I really appreciate Andrea's willingness to look into seeing if we can get that done. I think one of the things we really need to do also is to rethink what historic preservation means for the city of Minneapolis. We have always limited ourselves by what the federal preservation program and the regulatory processes allow. And historic preservation at the local level can be so much more than that, and so much more of a community engagement than what those processes allow. And I really want that to be part of our conversation at our retreat. We could be looking at helping support local businesses and intangible heritage and art and language and culture that goes well beyond what the specific federal regulations are for local preservation programs. We can do more, and we should do more, and we need to be better. I firmly believe we need to improve the diversity of our commission. I am more than willing to step down if it was a way that we could get more diverse people on the commission. And just from a practical sense, and this is not the super forward-looking aspects and kind of the things that we want to talk about related to change, is we need to do some really practical things in response to what just happened, and that includes photographically documenting the damage that has occurred on historic properties or possible historic properties throughout the city, both along Lake Street and up in North Minneapolis. And I firmly believe that we should also document photographically what has happened to the 3rd Precinct Station and Cup Grocery. I see both of those areas as being possible sacred sites. Certainly Cup, the grocery where the murder happened. I think we need to document that now so that we can adequately discuss it sometime down in the future. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. I see that there's a bunch of commissioners who wish to speak, but if we could go to Andrea Burke to speak in response to Commissioner Howard's comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard, for your comments. Just as an update to, or I think as a note to your comment about documenting some of the buildings that have been damaged as part of the events of the last week. My team has been in trying to find what ways to move forward and to do something on the more immediate front, not on the larger front that you are all discussing, but we are working to actively put together a list in conjunction with the other cities' departments for damaged buildings, and specifically noting which ones are landmarks, which ones are potential historic resources, which ones are listed in the National Register as a start. And then noting what damage. Now, granted, there's a larger reason for some of this in terms of how and what regulations fit into that, and what is our role and what can we do. I am in some discussions with, I have a scheduled, well, unscheduled, but supposed to talk to somebody tomorrow in the city of Baltimore who dealt with it somewhat similar, I'm not going to say completely similar, dealt with damage as a result of the riots from the Freddie Gray in 2015, and what Baltimore did in response to that to help streamline and work with property owners on moving forward with rebuilding or not rebuilding or doing something moving forward within the scope of the regulations. My staff, Sheila, is heading up this effort to put together this list and starting to document pictures. Sorry, I'm also have the ordinance in front of me, but to document pictures of some of these buildings and get out there and get at least what's happening now. And like I said, we're still working through as the dust settles from all of this, but we're starting to see the dust settle and starting to see more clear paths, and the city is working on a unified statement and vision to move forward on this. But from a heritage preservation standpoint, that is what we are doing as a team to start to move forward from that.
That's great to hear. Just know that I've already received one contact from an architectural historian who lives in South Minneapolis, who has volunteered his time and efforts if you need help doing any kind of documentation, reevaluation, additional survey. And I'm sure that there are other architectural historians, myself included, who would be more than willing to donate time to those efforts. I think all of us in Minneapolis know what is kind of facing us with that effort, and we're willing to donate time. So just let us know.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Kind of following on that line of thought, I have heard from a contact at the Center for Architecture that they've been exploring ways to document, specifically Lake Street and the corner of 38th in Chicago, and there's been some discussion with them on potentially laser scanning, so like a complete 3D rendering of some of the sites. And I don't know if that's something that we might be interested in partnering with them on, but I think the idea of partnering with other groups might be an opportunity at this point.
I think a 3D scan would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think their vision is that they want people to be able to sort of step into people who aren't in Minneapolis, who can't understand, to be able to more realistically step into the situation. Let's see who's next on the list. Commissioner Kling.
I very much agree with what all of you have been saying. I also just want to mention that I think it's when we consider all of the processes that we'll have to take in order to really try to highlight and focus on the communities of color in Minneapolis, I think we should also just keep in mind that we always want to try to center those voices. We want to try to center the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the city, and make sure that they have a seat at the table. And hopefully, I think a high priority of that is, of course, like some of you have mentioned, having someone of color on the commission, but also just making sure that we build relationships with organizations and community organizations, art organizations, other stakeholders within these communities, and really make sure that we are reflecting what they want to see change.
Thank you, Commissioner Kling. I think that is a good point. Commissioner Bjornberg.
Yeah, I think I sort of want to echo what a lot of other people have been saying. I think that it would be, I would be really happy if we could do a little bit more kind of community engagement and focus on intangible heritage. I feel like that is one of the things that I've sort of been seeing lacking in preservation kind of as a whole in the past few years, and just kind of the way that the National Register criteria and all of this stuff really kind of isn't set up to recognize these things. And so I would kind of appreciate if we could look at that and try to think about how we can look at all pieces of heritage differently, but then also being respectful of, like, we are we are, you know, a white commission, and so I would want to make sure that we are also engaging with communities as we are saying, okay, this is what we think is important, and this is how we want to kind of recognize that. I think that that would be really irresponsible of us. So, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. I think we all agree with that sentiment. Commissioner Sandbolt.
Hi. I don't really have anything new to say so much as to just kind of put a fine point on it. You know, we all recognize that our commission is probably a little one-sided from our perspective. But that being said, it is our responsibility to represent people that aren't necessarily like ourselves. So I think we talked a little bit at our last retreat about trying to be more proactive. And I see that as kind of a big part of this conversation, and a lot of us have said it, that we want to be more proactive about going out into these communities, hearing from people what's important to them and their culture, and what needs to be preserved so that we balance the history that we're preserving. I don't think we should shy away from preserving history and preservationism, and I think all of us agree to that, but we do need to tell a more balanced story. And so I think that community outreach piece is something that we should each start to feel a little more personal responsibility for, and that we need to find those communities and help give them a voice. We need to be reaching out and saying, listen, this isn't my history, this is your history. Tell me how we can help you tell your story. So I think we're all kind of getting to a point here where we're realizing that we need to do a little more outreach into communities that we are not necessarily a part of, but that we can help represent. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. I have a quick question for some of the longer-term members of the commission, specifically Commissioner Mack. It's my understanding that previously the commission has had either like subcommittees or working groups or smaller groups of the commission that meet on various topics. And I'm wondering how that's worked in the past, because I'm curious if maybe a smaller group of commissioners working specifically on engagement around our policies or potential sites around the issue of systematic racism is something we could pursue. But there haven't been any smaller groups since I've been on the commission.
Right. I don't think there have ever been subcommittees, but there have been task forces. And I think that's what you're talking about, and probably a very good way to proceed, because it can be more focused, and especially with the open meeting laws and you know the constraints of getting all of us together. You know, there could be a focused group that came back to the commission with some recommendations. Good idea.
Okay, so a task force is how it's previously sort of been done on other topics.
And you know, we've talked about community engagement, I think probably at every retreat I've been at, but it hasn't really changed. It's a little bit the structure of the commission. You know, we have our meetings, and so, you know, this is an opportunity to really try to implement something that's been out there for a long time.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Commissioner Vandereyck?
Yeah, I mean, so since I started this conversation, we don't need to be drawn on too late in the night. It's already almost 7:30, so I just thought I would kind of wrap up what I just heard, which was awesome. So thank you guys so much for that. And I think that all this stuff down, I think this is all stuff we should talk about in detail in our retreat. I think just to kind of pull back to what I said at the beginning, we're only going to change this if we create actionable steps. And so, like, it's exactly what you said about the task force, Chair Sundberg and Commissioner Mack. I think that's a phenomenal idea. Like, what a great way for us to really drill down into these issues. I also think, but just to state it for the record, we need more Black, Indigenous, people of color on our commission. We need any. So I would encourage each one of us to dig back into our own personal networks of Minneapolis residents in our professional field Because it doesn't serve us to bring somebody onto the commission that doesn't have the professional background to work in this and do this work with us. But that said, I can think off the top of my head of 4 architects that live in the city of Minneapolis that would be good representatives to add to this commission. So start thinking about that as we approach the next roll off of the commission, or if it does make sense for a commissioner to roll off and be replaced by a Black, Indigenous, person of color, or an immigrant. I of course would give my seat up for that too. So, so I just want to again reiterate that we should treat our retreat as a deadline for actionable steps that each one of us believe that we can commit to. Like, for instance, if we're going to do a task force, then let's think about what that would look like, how many times we'd meet, what our goals would be, and I'll give a lot of thought to what I think that could be, and I would be happy to be a part of it. So that's kind of like, just let's think about this in terms of actionable, less than wishes, and dreams. Because we can dream and talk about it for as long as we want, but until we all commit to making that difference, it's not going to happen. So thanks again, you guys, for having this conversation. I think this was so valuable, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Der Eyck. I'm going to go to Andrea Burke.
Thank you. I appreciate all your comments and your passion to allow more room on this commission for people of color. Before anybody starts resigning, please just hold on a second. There are some, this might as well be the place to say it. There are some spots that will be opening on this commission. I have been in discussions with Commissioner Kling, who is going to be giving up his spot in July to attend school. So we will be having an opening at that time, although there is some discussion with the clerks about when we can open up and advertise for that opening. So we will be down a commissioner starting, I think, Commissioner Kling and I discussed this earlier, probably in the week or last week, but sometime probably towards the end of July. So we will have one there. I know of some other, and I'm not going to name names because that's not appropriate, but at least I know one other of you have expressed to me that their term is ending soon, when terms usually end in the fall and December, and may not be interested in coming back. So there are other opportunities opening up soon before people start dropping off. So, and I know that recently my staff, oh my goodness, this might have been in the fall, attended a community, what was it called? Neighborhood, it was at the convention center. This was long before COVID, and had gotten names of a fair amount of people in those discussions who are from different parts of the city, presumably the north side, who would be interested in joining this commission. So we have some names, we have applications not current at this moment, and we have potential openings that may be coming up. So that hopefully is just more information for you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Commissioner Stady?
Sorry to make the meeting even longer. One thought that I've had with some of the history of the North Side, history of the planning department, I think reconciliation is going to have to be part of our community engagement, because I know there's parts of our community that feel like they've historically been ill-served by the government of Minneapolis when it comes to built structures.
Thank you, Commissioner Stady. Commissioner Kling?
Yes, I just want to mention real quick. I think my last meeting date that I'm planning on should be July 14th. I'm going to be moving to New York to attend Columbia University's Historic Preservation Master's Program, starting in.
Congratulations.
Not sure if it's going to happen in person yet for the fall, but they are still planning on at least some in-person classes.
Congrats, Jesse. That's awesome.
Yay. I didn't scare you off.
Congratulations, Jesse. But we'll miss you, of course, on the commission. But exciting next steps. Are there any final remarks from anybody? I would like everybody to keep brainstorming so that when we reach the retreat, we have a list of ideas, as Commissioner Van Der Eyck discussed, actionable items that we can move forward with. But is there anything else? Oh, Commissioner Mack.
I would like to say thank you to our chair for doing a terrific job. It's not easy, and you're really doing a great job, and I just want to commend you.
Oh, thank you.
And also the staff, thank you.
I concur.
It looks like Andrea would like to speak one more time.
I'm sorry, commissioners, you've seen me a lot tonight. Ideas for the retreat, please email them to me, and I will compile a list for topics. I have not come up with an agenda yet, but we will, like a normal meeting, we will be posting an agenda. It will go on the calendar in the LIM system, and it will be noticed should any of the members of the public like to view. But please send me all of your ideas. I've been taking notes, but I don't think I have everything down as everyone's been talking. I promise that will be the last time, and I appreciate all your thanks.
Before you go, Andrea, would it be a Teams meeting like this format? Is that how we would do it?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Thank you. Any last remarks from anybody? I am not seeing any. So we have completed all the items on the agenda for the meeting. Thank you for hanging in there. I know it was a bit of a long one. If there is no other business, which it seems like there's not, I will declare this meeting adjourned. And the next regular meeting of the HPC is June 23rd, 2020. Thank you, everybody.